October 2023, Manhattan, when 35-year-old Damien Cross acquired the struggling Romano fashion house for $43 million, he didn't just buy a company, he bought a wife. The contract was precise and non-negotiable. 26-year-old Sofia Romano would marry him within 60 days, or her family's century-old business would be liquidated and her elderly grandfather would lose everything. Damien Cross was worth $14 billion and had built his empire by destroying anyone who stood in his way. His acquisition strategy was legendary for its brutality. He would identify family-owned businesses in distress, acquire their debt, then force impossible choices that led to complete ownership of assets that had taken generations to build. Sofia stood in the conference room watching her family's lawyer review the marriage contract with the expression one might reserve for a death warrant. The terms were humiliating. She would be Damien's wife in every legal sense, bound to his household and public image, with no financial independence and no right to divorce without forfeiting everything her family held dear. The Romano fashion house had been Sofia's passion project since graduating from Parsons School of Design. She had spent 4 years building it from a small boutique into a promising brand, only to watch her grandfather's medical expenses and the pandemic's economic impact drive them to bankruptcy. When Damien's company acquired their debt, Sofia knew their legacy was doomed. Damien barely acknowledged Sofia during the signing, treating her like any other asset being transferred. His grey eyes held no warmth as he outlined expectations for their upcoming marriage, public appearances, social obligations, and maintaining his image as a successful family man. Sofia signed with steady hands, her composure hiding the fury beneath. She had no idea that the man acquiring her was fighting his own demons, or that his carefully constructed persona was about to crumble under pressures he had spent years hiding. Damien Cross lived in a penthouse fortress 60 floors above Manhattan, where every surface gleamed with cold perfection and no trace of human warmth penetrated the architectural barriers he had constructed around his existence. The 30,000 square foot space served as both home and symbol of his untouchable status, filled with priceless art he never looked at and luxury amenities he never used. His daily routine was controlled isolation. Damien woke at 4:30 a.m., exercised while reviewing market reports, and left for his office before household staff arrived. He returned after midnight, spending hours reviewing acquisition targets and planning the destruction of competitors. Human contact was limited to necessary business interactions and choreographed public appearances. The business world knew Damien as a machine of calculated destruction, but they didn't see the prescription bottles hidden in his desk drawer or the sleepless nights spent pacing his empty apartment. Anxiety medication, sleeping pills, and antidepressants were his secret weapons against a mind that never stopped calculating threats and planning defensive strategies. Former employees described him as brilliant but terrifying, a man who could identify weaknesses with surgical precision. He fired executives for minor infractions, dismantled departments showing slight inefficiency, and created an atmosphere of fear that motivated through terror. Turnover was astronomical, but profits were always exceptional. Damien's ruthlessness was armor against a world that had taught him early that weakness meant destruction. Abandoned by his mother at age 7 and raised in foster homes where survival required constant vigilance, he had learned that controlling everything meant never being surprised by betrayal again. His previous relationships had been strategic arrangements with women who understood they were performing roles rather than sharing genuine intimacy. The decision to acquire Sofia through marriage was simply an extension of this philosophy. He needed a wife to complete his public image, and she needed financial salvation, It was a transaction that made perfect sense to a man who had reduced all human relationships to contractual obligations. Sofia Romano had spent 26 years learning to navigate between traditional Italian-American family expectations that demanded feminine submission and the cutthroat fashion industry that required fierce independence and creative vision. This duality had forged a strength that neither her family nor Damien recognized when they negotiated her future around a conference table. Growing up in Brooklyn as the granddaughter of immigrants, Sofia had watched her grandmother Maria endure decades of financial insecurity while maintaining an iron will disguised as domestic devotion. Maria had taught Sofia that true power often came from allowing others to underestimate you while quietly building your own resources and knowledge. Sofia's education at Parsons had been funded through scholarships and her own freelance work for wealthy Manhattan socialites who were impressed by her talent but dismissive of her background. She had learned to smile graciously while internally cataloging every slight and building networks with people who might prove useful when she was ready to claim her own space. The Romano fashion house had been more than a business venture. It was Sofia's declaration of independence from family expectations and industry limitations. She had created designs that bridged accessible fashion and luxury craftsmanship, building a brand that honored her heritage while appealing to contemporary tastes. The company's near bankruptcy wasn't due to creative failures, but circumstances beyond her control. What Damien's research hadn't uncovered was Sofia's extensive network within New York's creative communities. 4 years of building her business had connected her with artists, writers, and social activists who formed an underground network of influence operating outside traditional power structures. These relationships would prove more valuable than financial assets. Sofia's agreement to marry Damien wasn't surrender. It was strategic retreat that would allow her to study her enemy from within his fortress. She had no intention of remaining a passive victim, but understood that escape would require patience, planning, and deep understanding of his vulnerabilities. Her family saw her sacrifice as noble, but expected contentment in her role, having no idea she was planning not just liberation, but complete transformation of the man who thought he had purchased her compliance. The wedding at St. Patrick's Cathedral, with 500 guests, was understood as a business merger disguised as romance. Sofia wore a custom Vera Wang gown selected by Damien's assistant, walking toward a man who had spent more time reviewing logistics than considering the woman he was marrying. Damien delivered vows with mechanical precision, making legal commitments about property while avoiding any mention of love or emotional connection. Sofia's vows were equally formal, her voice steady despite the surreal nature of promising to cherish a man who had essentially purchased her through corporate coercion. The Plaza Hotel reception was carefully orchestrated wealth and power, where guests networked over champagne while bride and groom performed their roles with professional competence. Damien spent most of the evening conducting business, treating his wedding as an opportunity to close deals and intimidate competitors who had come to witness his latest acquisition. Sofia navigated social requirements with grace that impressed even Damien's most cynical associates, but she was conducting intelligence gathering. She observed power dynamics among his business circle, noting alliances and rivalries that might prove useful in understanding her new husband's world. The evening's most telling moment came during their obligatory first dance, when Sofia felt the slight tremor in Damien's hands and noticed the careful control he maintained over his breathing. Up close, she could see that his famous composure required constant effort, suggesting vulnerabilities his public persona was designed to hide. After guests departed, Sofia found herself in Damien's penthouse, shown to an elegant guest suite that would serve as her quarters. The message was unmistakable: This was business, not marriage involving intimacy. Damien outlined expectations with the same detachment he might use to brief a new employee. What Damien didn't notice was Sofia's careful observation of his living space, noting the complete absence of personal items, family photographs, or anything suggesting human connection. She was beginning to understand that the man who had acquired her was himself trapped in a prison of his own creation, isolated by the very wealth and power others envied. Sofia's first month revealed the suffocating nature of her gilded cage and the equally profound isolation of her captor. Her schedule was controlled by Damien's assistant, filled with social obligations and public appearances designed to showcase his successful marriage while advancing business interests. The penthouse was a monument to wealth without warmth, where priceless art hung on walls that had never heard laughter, and gourmet meals were served in dining rooms echoing with silence. Sofia had access to unimaginable luxury, but no freedom to use it according to her own desires. Damien's routine rarely intersected with hers beyond required appearances. He left before dawn and returned after midnight, conducting his empire from offices Sofia was never invited to visit. Their interactions were limited to brief, formal discussions about upcoming obligations or household matters. What Sofia began noticing were signs of a man barely maintaining control. Damien's insomnia was evident in late-night pacing sounds, lights in his study burning until dawn, and exhaustion he couldn't quite hide behind his perfectly applied public mask. She discovered that household staff maintained the same emotional distance Damien demanded from everyone. The housekeeper, security team, and assistant all performed duties with professional efficiency but seemed genuinely afraid of their boss, suggesting his reputation for ruthlessness extended into private life. Sofia's isolation was broken by secret communications with fashion industry contacts who kept her informed about her grandfather's health and the Romano fashion house's status. These conversations revealed that Damien was actually maintaining the business rather than liquidating it, though his motives remained unclear. Most disturbing was watching Damien's increasing reliance on alcohol and prescription medications. She began finding empty pill bottles in his study wastebasket and noticed that evening scotch had become multiple drinks consumed with mechanical regularity. Sofia realized she was witnessing the slow-motion breakdown of a man who had built his identity around absolute control but was losing his grip on his own mental health. This discovery changed her perspective from viewing Damien as enemy to seeing him as a fellow prisoner in a system benefiting no one, including its creator. The first major crack in Damien's facade appeared during a hostile takeover attempt against one of his key holdings. Viktor Kozlov, a Russian oligarch with a personal vendetta, launched coordinated assault combining financial warfare with psychological manipulation designed to exploit Damien's deepest fears about betrayal and abandonment. Sofia watched from the sidelines as Damien's anxiety escalated from controlled tension to barely concealed panic. His usual surgical precision gave way to erratic behavior, sleepless nights stretching into days, and increasing reliance on alcohol and medication that concerned even his most loyal employees. The attack wasn't just financial. Kozlov had somehow obtained information about Damien's childhood trauma and was using it to destabilize his psychological defenses. Rumors began circulating about his foster care background, his mother's abandonment, and the poverty that had shaped his obsession with control and wealth. During a brutal board meeting where directors questioned his leadership, Sofia witnessed his first complete breakdown. She found him in his study afterward, hyperventilating and unable to focus, surrounded by scattered pills and empty glasses, suggesting hours of self-medication. For the first time since their marriage, Sofia saw past Damien's reputation to the damaged human being underneath. Instead of satisfaction at his vulnerability, she found herself responding with compassion she would show any wounded creature. She sat quietly beside him, offering nothing more than presence until his breathing stabilized. Damien's response to her unexpected kindness was confusion and suspicion. He couldn't understand why a woman he had purchased would offer comfort to the man who had destroyed her freedom. Sofia's simple explanation that suffering was suffering, regardless of who was experiencing it, challenged every assumption he had made about human nature. This moment created unexpected intimacy neither had anticipated. For the first time, Damien spoke to Sofia as a person rather than possession, expressing bewilderment about her capacity for compassion towards someone who had harmed her. Sofia began understanding that Damien's cruelty wasn't born from evil, but from deep-seated terror of being hurt again. As Damien's psychological defenses continued crumbling under Kozlov's relentless assault, Sofia found herself becoming his confidant and strategic advisor. Her background in fashion and design had given her insights into human psychology that Damien's purely financial education had never provided. Sofia began attending strategy meetings, not as decoration, but as active participant whose observations about people and motivations proved invaluable. She could read subtleties of body language and emotional subtext that Damien's analytical mind missed, providing intelligence that improved his decision-making and reduced paranoia. The turning point came when Sofia suggested counterattack strategy that went against every instinct Damien had developed. Instead of responding to Kozlov's assault with financial brutality, she proposed they expose Kozlov's own vulnerabilities through carefully leaked information about his illegal activities and human rights violations. Damien's initial resistance revealed the depth of his trust issues and fear of appearing weak. He had spent years believing that overwhelming force was the only reliable response to threat, that the concept of strategic finesse seemed impossibly risky. Sofia's patience with Damien's fears and willingness to work within his limitations gradually earned his trust in ways that surprised them both. She didn't try to change his fundamental nature, but helped him channel aggressive instincts more effectively, creating space for his intelligence to function without being overwhelmed by anxiety. Their collaboration revealed complementary strengths neither had expected. Damien's financial genius, combined with Sofia's emotional intelligence, created strategies that were both effective and ethically defensible, marking significant departure from his previous methods. As they worked together into early morning hours, their relationship began shifting from captor and prisoner to genuine partners facing common threat. Sofia discovered that Damien was capable of humor, creativity, and consideration when he wasn't constantly defending himself against perceived attacks. Damien began seeking Sofia's opinion on decisions beyond the immediate crisis, finding that her perspective helped him see situations more clearly and make choices he felt better about afterward. For the first time in his adult life, he was experiencing what it felt like to have someone he could trust completely. The complete breakdown Damien had been avoiding for years finally arrived during a night when combined stress of business pressures and suppressed trauma overwhelmed every defense mechanism he had constructed. Sofia found him in his study at 3 a.m., surrounded by wreckage of his controlled environment, overturned furniture, scattered pills, and physical evidence of a man at war with his own mind. Damien was experiencing a full-scale panic attack, complicated by alcohol poisoning, and what appeared to be a psychotic break from reality. He was muttering about foster homes, his mother's abandonment, and childhood memories that had been buried for decades under layers of professional success and emotional numbness. Sofia's response revealed strengths even she hadn't known she possessed. Instead of calling for help or retreating in fear, She approached Damien with calm competence of someone who understood this moment required steady nerves and genuine human connection rather than professional intervention. She spent hours talking Damien through his breakdown, helping him process memories and fears he had never shared with another human being. Sofia learned about the 7-year-old boy left at a bus station by a mother who couldn't handle responsibility, and years of institutional care that had taught him to trust no one. The most profound revelation was that Damien's entire empire had been constructed as elaborate defense against ever feeling that helpless again. Every acquisition, every destroyed competitor, every moment of control was his attempt to build walls high enough that no one could abandon him because no one could reach him. Sofia's compassionate response to his vulnerability created intimacy neither had experienced before. She didn't judge his weakness or minimize his pain, but simply remained present as he fell apart and began the long process of putting himself back together in a new configuration. As dawn broke over Manhattan, Damien found himself in the unprecedented position of being completely known by another person and not destroyed by the experience. Sofia had seen him at his absolute worst and hadn't fled, hadn't used his vulnerability against him. This breakthrough marked the beginning of Damien's transformation from a man who controlled through fear to someone learning to connect through trust. Mercedes-esque Block 9, Love in the Ruins, 24-27 Lam. In the weeks following Damien's breakdown, Sofia watched her husband slowly rebuild himself with a different blueprint. The man who had acquired her as property was learning to see her as a partner, while she discovered that her feelings had evolved from strategic tolerance to genuine affection for the wounded person she was helping to heal. Damien began including Sofia in business decisions because her insights had proven invaluable and her presence had become essential to his emotional stability. He started asking for her opinion on acquisitions and strategic planning, treating her as trusted advisor rather than decorative accessory. Their living arrangement gradually became more intimate as Damien spent increasing time in common areas rather than isolating himself in his study. They began sharing meals, watching movies together, and having conversations that revealed shared interests in art, literature, and the complexities of building something meaningful from difficult circumstances. Sofia discovered that Damien possessed qualities she had never expected: intellectual curiosity extending beyond financial gain, dry humor that emerged when he felt safe, and capacity for loyalty that was fierce once earned. His transformation from captor to partner had revealed the person he might have become if circumstances had been different. The physical attraction that developed surprised both parties. Sofia had expected to endure whatever intimate obligations came with marriage, but instead found herself drawn to Damien's unexpected vulnerability and gentleness he revealed when defensive walls came down. Their first genuine romantic encounter occurred spontaneously, growing from emotional intimacy rather than obligation. Damien, who had approached marriage as business contract, discovered that emotional connection enhanced rather than threatened his security. Sofia's love wasn't something he had purchased or demanded. It was something she had chosen to give, despite having every reason to withhold it. Their relationship faced complications from external pressures and internal doubts. Sofia's family struggled to understand how she could love someone who had bought her, while Damien's associates were confused by his increasing consideration for ethical implications. Despite these challenges, they began functioning as a true married couple who chose to be together rather than two people trapped by circumstances. Billionaire, de Block 10, Redemption and Transformation, 27-30 Kul. 1 year after their forced marriage began, Sofia and Damien had transformed not only their relationship, but the entire culture of Damien's business empire. What started as a transaction to save a failing fashion company had evolved into a partnership that challenged everything both had believed about power, success, and human connection. Sofia's influence led Damien to restructure his business practices with emphasis on ethical operations and employee welfare. They implemented profit-sharing programs, established mental health resources for staff, and transformed his companies from places of fear into environments where creativity and collaboration could flourish. The Romano fashion house became a flagship example of their new approach. Under their joint leadership, it expanded into a luxury brand that honored both Sofia's creative vision and Damien's strategic expertise, proving that ethical practices and profitability could coexist. Damien's personal transformation was equally remarkable. With Sofia's support and professional therapy, he had confronted his childhood trauma and learned to build relationships based on trust rather than control. His reputation evolved from feared predator to respected leader, though he maintained the strategic thinking that had made him successful. Sofia had found her purpose in using her position to advocate for ethical business practices and support for family-owned companies facing corporate pressure. She became a sought-after speaker on entrepreneurship and corporate responsibility, using her platform to help other small business owners avoid the circumstances that had nearly destroyed her family. Their marriage had also healed old wounds within Sofia's family. Her grandfather, Antonio, recovered his health and pride as the Romano fashion house flourished beyond his dreams. Her parents, who had felt guilty about Sofia's sacrifice, watched with amazement as their daughter transformed her forced marriage into a love story. The couple's joint charitable foundation became legendary in New York social circles, not just for generous giving, but for hands-on approach to solving problems rather than simply writing checks. Sofia and Damien personally visited the families and communities they supported, applying the same strategic thinking that had built their business success to creating sustainable social change. Sees Block 11, The Empire of Love, 30 or 33. 2 years after their marriage contract was signed, Sofia and Damien stood together at the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the Romano Cross Center for Ethical Business Practices, a research institute that would help family businesses survive corporate pressure while maintaining their values and independence. The center represented everything their partnership had accomplished, a fusion of Sofia's creative vision and ethical principles with Damien's strategic expertise and resources, creating something neither could have achieved alone. It would provide legal support, financial advice, and mentorship to entrepreneurs facing the same challenges that had nearly destroyed Sofia's family. Their personal relationship had deepened into love that was tested and proven rather than assumed or demanded. Damien had learned to trust Sofia completely, while she had discovered that her husband was capable of tremendous growth when supported rather than feared. Their marriage had become a model of partnership that surprised everyone who knew their history. The business empire that Damien had built through fear and domination had been transformed into a collection of companies known for innovation, ethical practices, and employee satisfaction. The change had actually improved profitability, proving that treating people well was not just morally superior, but strategically smart. Sofia's influence had extended far beyond their marriage and business ventures. She had become a powerful advocate for immigrant families and women entrepreneurs, using her platform to create opportunities for people who faced the same barriers she had encountered. Her success proved that strength could come from compassion rather than domination. Their joint success had also transformed their relationship with power itself. Rather than hoarding wealth and influence, they had learned to use their resources to create positive change for others. Their foundation had become one of the most effective charitable organizations in New York, known for solving problems rather than providing temporary relief. As they cut the ribbon together, Sofia and Damien understood that their greatest acquisition hadn't been companies or properties, but each other. The forced marriage that was supposed to solve one family's crisis had instead created something unprecedented, a partnership proving transformation was possible for anyone willing to choose growth over self-protection. The man who had once believed that controlling everything was the only path to safety had learned that sharing power with someone he trusted actually made him stronger. The woman who had been sold like property had discovered that her true value lay not in what others could take from her, but in what she chose to give when treated with respect and love.